Hey everybody, welcome to the video and welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here in quite some time, I have been covering Daytona Speed Weeks throughout the week, but I know a lot of people aren't too excited about those, but we have the Daytona 500 this weekend. We're going to be breaking it down for DraftKings purposes. It's going to be on February 14th, Valentine's Day, Sunday around 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and I am super excited about that. You guys that have been around the channel for quite some time know that I love super speedways, and I love short tracks, and Daytona is pretty much the best track of them all, so I'm super excited for it. I'm sure you guys are as well. But if this video helps you in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well, so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And YouTube tells us around 50% of the people who watch these videos have not yet subscribed. So if you're a frequent visitor to the channel, or if you're just new like what you see, consider that subscribe button because it really helps the channel grow. That obviously helps me out as well. And the more you guys interact with my content, it's going to help get new faces to see these videos. And my NASCAR community over here tends to do a very good job leaving likes, comments, and all that good stuff, so I really do appreciate it. And if you don't follow me over on social media, the handle's in the bottom 10 corner of your screen, but I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter and cpenn16 over on IG. And if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, that is always much appreciated. I put a ton of extra content and a ton of extra hard work into all that stuff that I put on over there. I do show you guys a preview of the spreadsheet on YouTube, but there's a ton of other stuff that goes in there. I got the projections, which did take out multiple tournaments last year. We had guys winning $20, $15, $10,000. It seemed like a lot of weeks in a row. So yeah, I think they were pretty solid last year. Power rankings was just based on an algorithm, cheat sheet, my own personal GPP driver exposures. I do play the big tournaments, 150 max it. So if you want to know exactly where my money's going, I cannot be more transparent about that. I have notes on each and every single one of those guys. The green flag speed cheat sheet, which I think is very helpful since we don't have practice these days. The heat map, the previous optimal lineups, the 2020 optimal lineups, past Daytona slate analysis, starting position track stats, loop data, a bunch of other stuff. I even have the aero package schedule, the stage links, a whole bunch of useful information. It's what I use each and every single week to build my lineups, and I think they are very helpful. $10 a month, and I'll throw something on the screen right about here so you know exactly what you get with it. You can also hop into the Discord chat as well, which is always a very good time. It's very entertaining. Ton of people in there. We had like several hundred people last year, and people are usually talking. And if you want to talk NASCAR at 11 p.m. on a weeknight, I will be there and I will talk to you. You can ask me all the questions you want. It's always a good time in the Discord. But I think that is it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this race. And as per tradition, I did forget to mention a couple of things. And I have a sticky note here so I didn't forget everything. So number one, I will be doing 2 live streams on Sunday, one on my own channel and one on the Awesemo YouTube channel that I'll try to link in the description below if I remember, but I always say that I'm going to do that, and then I always don't do it because I forget, so someone will have to remind me. But I'll be going live on my own channel at around 10 a.m. Eastern. I could change that to 10:30 or 11, whatever you guys prefer, but I'm thinking 10's a good time to do that. And then on the Awesemo Live Before Lock live stream, which is a new show this year, I'm not sure if Phil's going to be on that with me or not, but I will definitely be there for sure. But it's either going to start at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, because I forget exactly when DraftKings locks, but it's going to be exactly an hour before lock, so we'll figure that out. I'll let you guys know. Also, Sal Vetri, a guy around my age that does YouTube content, daily fantasy content, reached out to me yesterday to do NASCAR DFS stuff on his channel. So I'm going to release a video every Friday, and that video actually did get released a few hours ago. So if you want to check that out, it's more of a simpler video because I'm assuming a lot of those people over there aren't too in-depth into NASCAR. So I saved the more like deep hitting analysis video on this channel. And then if you guys want like a picks video going over some bets, DFS stuff, and strategy and things like that, I did post around a 20-minute video on Sal's channel if you want to check that out. He also does some other stuff like NBA. I don't cover NBA on YouTube, so if you want NBA content, he's definitely the guy for that. I know he does some other stuff as well, so I do want to thank him for that once again. So check that out. Try to link that in the description below. Also, DraftKings contest. Someone mentioned to me that in my last video on the duels, if I'm going to be doing a DraftKings contest once again this year. And I am. I stopped doing it at the end of the year last year because football kind of took over, but it is Daytona 500 time. NASCAR is in full swing, so I will once again be doing the DraftKings contest. Now, I'm not sure if it's going to be a free contest where I'll personally pay the winner, or we could do like $1 or $2 per entry, or maybe even $3, whatever. 100 people, 150 people, and would make that work. But to get in the DraftKings contest, all you have to do in the comments down below, give me your DraftKings username, because I can't post a link to the contest because YouTube does not like gambling links, so I'm not going to link that down below. Just tell me your DraftKings username in a comment. Say something nice if you want to. That'll definitely up your chances to get in if you say something nice to me. If you say something mean, I still might invite you, but you're definitely going lower on the list. So Let me know in the comments below what your DraftKings username is, and I'll be happy to send you that invite. But anyway, let's get into the preview of this race. So this is the Daytona 500, the gem of the season. Everyone loves Daytona. Everyone loves the Daytona 500. We are at Daytona International Speedway. It's a restrictor plate race, which means we are going to see pack racing, which kind of gets into the strategy is we are going to stack the back for the most part. I don't mind taking stabs and guys starting near the front for tournaments. I'll definitely have exposure to guys up front because sometimes they squeak through the cracks and they end up winning the race or getting inside the top 5 and making the optimal lineup. But for the most part, the majority of our lineups is going to feature guys that start near the back because Daytona is a track that produces a ton of wrecks. That's because they're just so tightly together. Like if we're at Auto Club or something like that, yeah, we could see Kevin Harvick getting a couple of seconds ahead of the field. That does not happen at Daytona. It's just not possible the way the cars are built for this race. So we're going to see pack racing and one bad move, one aggressive block, one rookie mistake, and start a chain reaction that takes out half the field. And the guys that are starting up front, they can get like nearly -30, -40 DraftKings points, and the guys in the back, they move right on up and easily outscore those guys starting up front. And the thing is, even if those guys in the back happen to crash early on, they can still score a couple of points. And if a guy is starting in first or second, so let's say Alex Bowman's starting in first, he happens to wreck and finishes around 30th place, that's still close to -30-ish DraftKings points. And that guy that wrecked in the back, that started in the back, he's still scoring anywhere from like 0 to 5 points. So they can still outscore the guy by 30 points. So that's the strategy for this video. And if you guys don't believe my words, I can show you numbers that back. And since I'm feeling nice and it's the first race of the season, I will show you a little something you can get inside the spreadsheet here. So we're going to look at some starting position track stats specifically for Daytona. And as you're going to notice, the guys starting up front tend to perform horribly. So let's look at M column here. It's average place differential. The guy starting in first is averaging -21.8 place differential spots, -9. As you're going to see, a bunch of red here. And red means bad, green means good. Where do you find the green on this sheet? It's the guys that are starting near the back. Look at these guys, green all around. I mean, yeah, they're not going to lead laps. They're not going to typically win the race, but you don't need that from these guys. These guys are, on average, absolutely killing these guys starting inside the top 10, top 15, even the top 20. So if you don't believe the words, the numbers speak for themselves. And something even better than this, we can look at the previous optimal lineups at Daytona, the past 6 races, as you're going to see. And I forget exactly what race this was, but I have my little chart here. 0 guys starting in the top 12, 1 guy in the 13 to 24 range, and 5 guys 25 through 40 back. And I can just scroll through the list here if you want to pause it, take a look for yourself. Guys that start in the back tend to make the optimal lineup here. If we look at the actual averages, 1 through 12, about a half a driver. 13 through 24, about 1.5 drivers. 25 through 40, about 4 drivers. So if you want to model your lineups like that, if you guys build 150 lineups, you go into Fantasy Cruncher and you want to set that as your settings for the build, like 0 to 1 guy starting in the front, you know, maybe 0 to 2 in the middle, then like 3 to 6 in the back. I think that's a really good way to approach this track. So again, if you didn't believe my words, those are the numbers to back it up. So just get that in your brain this week. Say it with me. We're stacking the back at Daytona for the most part. A couple exceptions, but for the most part, we're stacking the back. But anyway, this track is huge. It's 2.5 miles in length. We're going to see some really high speeds, close to 200 miles per hour. It's going to be 200 total laps, meaning we only have 140 dominator points. And the thing about dominator points here at Daytona, they're not that important. Yeah, there's going to be a main dominator for the most part, but we're going to see a lot of lead changes, and fast laps are completely random. And fast laps are more important than laps led because they're weighted heavier on DraftKings. They did take a half a point, or yeah, point like a 0.05, not half a point, 0.05 difference this year. But at Daytona, fast laps are completely random because these are drafting. Seriously, anybody can pick up a fast lap throughout the race. So not too concerned about dominator points. We are mainly focusing on place differential in this race and a little bit of finishing position potential, obviously, as well. And I think that's it for the preview. And I know a lot of people are complaining we're like 10 minutes in. We haven't gotten to the driver-by-driver breakdown at this point. But hey, it's my channel. I can talk as long as I want. So let's just skip into the driver-by-driver breakdown. And really quick, for the people that skipped to this portion of the video, because I know you are out there, I really recommend watching the preview portion of this video because there's a lot of useful information on there when it comes to building lineups. But anyway, let's get into it. So up top, we have Denny Hamlin at $10,400, starting back in 25th. He's the most expensive driver on the slate, but I definitely think it's deserved. He has been the class of the field here at Daytona. He's won back-to-back Daytona 500s, and I would not be surprised if he wins 3 straight in a row. That would be a record, and hey, I'm here for it. I mean, it was a really good race last Daytona 500. He just edged out Ryan Blaney. The horrible thing happened to Ryan Newman, but that was a fantastic last lap of racing. And I think Denny Hamlin, I mean, he's the favorite in Vegas to win this race, and he should definitely be a factor here. It also helps that he's starting in the back as well, so he's an elite place differential play. So looking at his numbers in the past few races at Daytona, got an average finish at 13.3, averaging nearly 40 DraftKings points per race, 2 wins, 3 top 5s, the most laps led per race. And if we were to look at his specific numbers last year at super speedway races, he absolutely killed them. 4 races, he finished inside the top 5 each time, had 2 wins, had the best driver, actually the second best driver rating right behind Joey Logano. It's a 0.1 difference. Average finish of 2.3. That's absolutely insane at a super speedway track, or super speedway tracks, I should say. He had 60.6 DraftKings points per race and the most laps led. So Denny Hamlin, he's starting in the back. I know he's not exactly all the way in the back, so there's a little bit of risk there. He's not completely safe, but he's been able to keep his nose clean at the super speedways recently, and I would not be surprised if it happens once again. His specific finishes at Daytona recently: 3rd, 1st, 26th, 1st, 38th, and 3rd. So when he doesn't get into an incident, he's usually a top 5 contender. So Denny Hamlin, I like him a ton here. Chase Elliott, 10,300. He is starting 12th. I feel like he'll be popular just because of the name, and he's NASCAR's favorite driver. He won the championship last year, and I totally get it. He's not bad at Daytona by any means. Those Hendrick cars always tend to bring a ton of speed. We saw that with Bowman and Byron in the duels and the qualifying. Well, I guess not the duels. Bowman had trouble in the duels, and Byron wrecked. I don't know why he didn't just lead some laps and hang back, because, you know, things like that can happen. But hey, I'm not in his mind, and I'm not a team owner, so I guess I can't really speak for him. But Chase Elliott, I'm sure he's going to have a ton of speed here. The problem is he is starting 12th, so I can only view him as a tournament play because there's definitely a ton of risk here, and he is no stranger to wrecking out at Daytona. If we're looking at his recent numbers here, they're actually not that great. The driver rating is good, and the average running position is good, which is what I would expect from Chase Elliott, but he's only averaging 21.4 DraftKings points per race here, an average finish of nearly 20th, only 1 top 5, only 1 top 10, and 2 top 15. So he hasn't had the best of luck here at Daytona. The recent finishes: 2nd, 17th, and 35th, 17th, 34th, and 33rd. Again, there's nothing you can really do about a guy wrecking, but, you know, guys that are aggressive and guys that contend for the win, they tend to be the guys that get caught up in the wrecks, because the back markers, they're not trying to make moves to win the race. They're just hanging back waiting for the wreck so they can get a nice top 20 finish to be proud about. These guys, they don't care about a top 20 finish. They want to win the whole thing. So that's kind of the reason they always get caught up in the wrecks. So Chase Elliott, he's reserved for tournaments only for me. Don't think I'd really get there in cash games by any means necessary, but he's definitely on my radar. I'm going to have exposure to him MME, but it probably won't be anything too crazy due to that starting position. Brett Keselowski at $10,100. He is starting all the way back in 24th, and he is going to a backup car, but that doesn't really concern me too much. I don't really want him up near the front anyway at the start of the race. And he offers us plenty of place difference upside. I assume he'll be much lower owned than Denny Hamlin. He's only starting in 1 spot further up. So if you want some leverage there, you could go heavier on Keselowski than Denny Hamlin. But I gotta be honest, Keselowski's history here recently has not been too pretty. And I know it's not really his fault getting caught up in wrecks, but it's just the way Brett Keselowski is. He's an aggressive driver, and that tends to have bad things happen to him at Daytona. So looking at his recent finishes here: 10th last year, which was nice. Then 36th, 39th, 12th, 36th, and 32nd. Those are some really, really bad finishes. So he's kind of a magnet for getting wrecked. But his overall numbers, like average running position, is not that bad. I mean, Team Penske tends to run pretty strong in these races. I would not be surprised if you see the Penske train form pretty soon. I'm not saying Keselowski's going to be up there really soon, but if he can get up there, him, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, maybe even MDB, they should form a train at some point, and they should be pretty strong. Because if you're looking at the track type form for the average running positions of these Team Penske cars, they're pretty darn good. Joey Logano's number 1 there at 7.6, Keselowski's at 11.5, Blaney's at 10.7, and then MDB, where is he at? He's 7,900. He's at 13.2, so not quite as good as those guys, but these guys typically run near the front at Daytona, Talladega, and they run the show. The problem is they just happen to get wrecked, which, you know, I mean, I guess it's not really his fault, but I guess it kind of is his fault, just the way he is. But I mean, I won't fault him for it. But the place differential is why I'm interested here. Starting 24th, he has plenty of upside here. The floor is decently low. And again, it's not like he's starting all the way back, so it's just a little bit farther past the middle. But the ceiling is very high, that's for sure. So I'll definitely have a decent amount of ownership on him, but I don't think he's an absolute lock button. But he's definitely one of the better plays on the slate, especially up top, because most of these guys are starting near the front. So place differential upside that he offers us definitely makes me very interested in him. And really, I forgot to mention this, but he's only averaging 5.3 DraftKings points per race recently at Daytona in an average finish outside the top 20. Again, you can't really fault him for everything because he gets wrecked, and it's not always his fault, but it's just something to be aware of. But his teammate, Ryan Blaney, Team Penske teammate, I just realized that, 3 Penske guys in a row, Keselowski, Blaney, and Logano, which makes things easier to talk about since they're all in a row. But he is starting 14, so he doesn't have quite the place differential upside that Keselowski does, but I feel like I almost like Blaney a little bit better now. He's definitely more of a tournament play than a cash play. I'd say Keselowski is much safer for cash than Ryan Blaney is, but going to try to go overweight on Blaney in tournaments here. He almost won this race last season. He was neck and neck with Denny Hamlin. It was very, very close. And Ryan Blaney, although I might be a bit biased here, you guys know I absolutely love Ryan Blaney. So anytime I can recommend him, I will. But there's a good reason for this. He's a very good super speedway driver. He won Talladega last year. Looking at his track type form, it's pretty darn good. Whoops, got mixed up. There's so many numbers here. Okay, so anyway, running position of 10.7 at these types of tracks, average finish inside the top 15, averaging about 35 DraftKings points per race, 2 wins, 3 top 5s, 5 top 10s. He's a lap leader. I like Ryan Blaney quite a bit. He ran these tracks very well last season specifically, had one of the best driver ratings, a win, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s. So for the most part, I think Ryan Blaney will definitely be a contender in this race. And I do think he has a good shot of winning as well. Joey Logano, last Penske teammate, official Penske teammate. I always like to throw MDB in there a little bit because he's pretty much a Penske car, but I guess it's not officially official. But Logano here, he's below $10,000, so he's going to start us off with this 9K group. He starts even further up than Ryan Blaney, so he is definitely a tournament play, and he is a very good super speedway driver, but it kind of explains how crazy Daytona is. So the average running position is a better indicator of how a driver, I would say, runs at these tracks better than the average finish, because the running position is where they are the majority of the race. If you have an average running position of first in a race, but then you end up wrecking out, I mean, you finish 40th, so I think the running position is a better indicator there, but he's only averaging 6.1 DraftKings points, an average finish outside the top 20, one of the best average running positions, though, and the best average driver rating, with a win, 2 top 5s, and some of the most laps led. So I like Logano here. If he doesn't wreck out, I think there's a very, very good chance he's contending for the win at the very last lap. I think he could squeak inside the top 3. He should lead, I'd say he could lead around 20 laps in this race as long as Penske has a strong car, which I would assume they would. So, yeah, I like Joey Logano in tournaments here. I won't have as much Logano as I will Ryan Blaney because they're basically the same price point, and Blaney gets 5 spots further back, so you get a little bit more of a floor there and higher upside because I feel like they can finish very close to each other. But Logano runs very, very well at Daytona, as do his teammates. And despite the poor history here finish-wise, I still think he can get the job done, because looking at these recent finishes for Logano, they're kind of like Keselowski, where they're absolutely horrendous. 27th, 26th, 25th. 4th was nice, then 39th, and then 4th again was nice. If you're looking at his numbers last season at these tracks, or I guess that's just the specific track type form, not just last season, the best running position, by far the best average drive rating, did have a win, 25 laps of that, which is the most of any drivers. So I like Logano here in tournaments, but I would not go there in cash games, as I don't think it's a very safe floor there at all. Then moving down to Kevin Harvick, he's in a very similar spot to Joey Logano, but to be honest, I'm not a guy that really likes to play Kevin Harvick at super speedways. He just doesn't really work out for me too much. Now, I know he has some decent finishes recently at Daytona. He does have 2 top 5s, only 2 top 10s, 2 top 15s, and 4 top 20s. I think he's going to have a decent finish, but he's never really super aggressive at Daytona. I believe it was last year, or it might have been the Talladega race. I can't remember exactly, but Kevin Harvick, he kind of just fell out of line and just rode around until the very end and tried to get a good finish. I just not really too fond of playing Kevin Harvick at these types of tracks, but starting 8th, there's a little bit of place differential upside, and if he does squeak inside the top 5, I would say there's a half decent shot he could make the optimal lineup if he ended up winning the race. But if he just gets a top 5, that's probably not going to be enough just to crack the optimal, because we have guys like Ross Chastain, Eric Jones, Tyler Reddick, Cole Custer, Chase Briscoe. If those kind of guys somehow find their way into the top 10, they will easily outscore Kevin Harvick, because I can't imagine Kevin Harvick's going to come out, lead 100 laps, and get 100 fast laps, because that's not really just how it works here at Daytona. Like, wouldn't surprise if he got out front, led some laps, but I'm just not too fond of playing Kevin Harvick at these types of tracks. Looking at his numbers, recent finishes at Daytona, has a 20th place finish, a 5th, 29th, 26th, 19th, and a 31st. Just not super impressive numbers here for Kevin Harvick, so he's a guy you can splash in multi-entry, but nothing I am too excited about. The track type form numbers, they're not that great either. Last season at the super speedways in 4 races, he had 1 top 5 finish, had an average finish of 13.8, which is not that bad. But the drive rating was awful at 65.3, but he did finish inside the top 20 each and every single time. But you need way more than just a top 20 from Kevin Harvick to pay off here and make the optimal lineup. So a guy I'm going to have probably minimal exposure to on this slate. Kyle Busch, 9,500. He is starting 10th. He's one of those other guys I just don't tend to play at super speedways unless they're starting way in the back. Kyle Busch, he's fine. Like, he'll run well, but he's just one of those guys that's a magnet for wrecks. Like, the average running position of 12, that is very, very good, but he has an average finish outside the top 20, only has 1 top 10 finish the past 6 races here. So he's a very iffy play for me. I'm not going to have a lot of exposure. He's not a guy I'm going to be full fading, because he does have the potential to win this race. We saw him running up front in the, the fall, where what month did this race happen last year? Was it August or was it September? I can't remember exactly. But in the second race at Daytona, he was up front and doing well, but Tyler Reddick made a move on him, and it absolutely crushed his day at the very end. So, yeah, as you can see, the past finishes here, 33rd and 34th last year was what he did. Then the year before that, 14th and 2nd. Like, if he got second place, there's a chance he can make the optimal, but there's not that much place differential upside, so he's definitely not a lock to make the optimal here, even if he did get inside the top 5. Martin Truex Jr., $9,300, starting 26. I hate playing Truex at super speedways. The guy just does not have a great history here, but unfortunately, that starting spot is definitely bringing him in. I'm going to have to play him because if he gets a top 10, that's a very, very good score here at Daytona. And it's not like he's allergic to having a good finish. He does have a couple of good finishes recently here. He does have 2 top 5s, but that's kind of the end of it because then it's 2 top 10s, 2 top 15s, and only 3 top 20s. If you're looking at the exact recent finishes here for Truex, he did finish 4th in the most recent race at Daytona, then 32nd, 22nd, 35th, did have a nice second place finish in the 2018 fall race, and then 18th. So it's going to be pretty hit or miss here, but that starting spot at 26, you definitely have to have interest just because of the place differential upside, because if he doesn't wreck, good chance he finds himself inside the top 10. Then you have the front row of Alex Bowman and William Byron. They're both teammates, and I'm glad they're priced around each other. To be honest, I don't see myself playing either one of these guys. Maybe, unless Bowman happens to go to the back. I know they're still kind of working on under the hood for Alex Bowman's car, but it sounds like they're going to be good to go. But I guess we'll know more in practice tomorrow because he had some issues in the duel. But he's really fast. I'm not going to deny that. He's now in the 48 car, what Jimmy Johnson used to ride in. He is blazing fast. He does have a good history at Daytona as one of the best average running positions. I actually think he does have the absolute best average running position, a very good drive rating. No wins or top 5s that show for it, but the guy is a good driver at Daytona. He just tends to get caught up in the mess sometimes. If you're looking at his recent finishes, 7th, 24th, 21st, 11th, 10th, 17th. So not bad in the races. He does not have any issues, but it's just something that happens at Daytona. But starting on the pole, you have virtually zero upside because if he wins the race, you got, I think it's what, 45 points now. They changed it from 46 to 45 this year. Let's assume he led 20 laps. It's still sometimes not enough for the optimal. We just don't typically see the guy that starts him first hit the optimal lineup because if we looked at the sheet earlier, they're averaging like negative 21 place differential spots per race. Like, I know he's fast, but there's a very high chance something happens to Alex Bowman at some point in this race, and he's $9,200. I feel like Bowman is arguably one of the worst plays on the entire state. I say that every single year, and look, at the beginning of the race, the stack-to-back strategy looks pretty dumb because you're getting killed on DraftKings, but once the wreck actually happens, and you gotta be patient. A lot of times, the wreck doesn't happen until the final 10, 20 laps, so you're gonna be looking dead for the majority of the day, but once that wreck happens, you shoot right on up. So early on, you're gonna look stupid, but at the end of the race, you usually look pretty darn smart. Same goes for William Byron, plus he is going to a backup car, because I already mentioned earlier, but he had that incident in the duel, so his car got trashed. Don't know why he didn't just fade back and ride around, but again, I can't speak for the guy, so whatever. But he's now going to the rear and still getting scored by second, so I feel like that's one of the easier fades in the world, because if he somehow works his way back up and wins the race, that still might not even be enough for him to hit the optimal lineup unless really there's no wrecks, which usually does not happen at Daytona. Going down to this 8K range, we have Kurt Busch starting in 20th. He's kind of in no man's land where he's not a super exciting play starting in the middle there at 20th, but he's definitely not the worst play in the road. Now, his recent track record at Daytona, it is not pretty at all, averaging 7.1 DraftKings points per race, an average finish of nearly 30th with a running position just inside the top 20. No wins, no top 5s, 1 top 10, and only 1 top 20 finish. If we look at the recent finishes for Kurt Busch, 34th, 33rd, 10th, 25th, 37th, and 26th. He's had a really bad string of bad luck, and I can't say that's going to continue, but starting 20th, I think it's worth having some exposure on just because the guy's not an awful plate racer. I forget how many years ago, but I remember him winning a race at Daytona. It was either Daytona or Talladega. I'm pretty sure, yeah, the Daytona 500. He won that race. So I still think Kurt's going to be fine. He has better numbers at Talladega than he has at Daytona, but starting 20th, there's definitely top 10 upside for Kurt there, and I don't mind taking a few stabs at that. Eric Almirola, 8,600. He's starting third. He looked really good in the first dual race. Actually ended up winning that race and actually led quite a few laps as well. So if you want to take a stab on a guy starting inside the top 3, Eric Almirola is a dark horse there, but he'd have to lead a good chunk of laps and win the race for him to make the optimal, because if he does not do that, it's very, very unlikely that Almirola makes the optimal. And if you really like Eric Almirola in the slate, you might as well go bet him to win, because if you like Almirola, you're pretty much betting on him to win this race on DraftKings. He's actually a pretty good super speedway racer. Now, he's better at Talladega, much better at Talladega than he is at Daytona, but the guy's still a pretty solid super speedway racer. We saw that in the dual race, so I don't mind taking some steps on Almirola, because if you look at the numbers when you combine them with Talladega, those numbers are pretty strong. Has 3 top 5s, 6 top 10s, 6 top 15s, and 7 top 20s, so he is very consistent, but overall the numbers are a little bit better at Talladega. He's a very risky play starting in 13th. Kyle Larson, $8,500 starting 13th. He's got that Hendrick power now, and we know how good Hendrick is at super speedway, so I would not be surprised to see Kyle Larson have a pretty good run here. The problem is he's kind of like Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Logano, Blaney, Chase Elliott, where they're all starting in a really tough spot to like for fantasy purposes, because there's not a lot of place differential upside, and there's a really low floor as well. So just be careful with Kyle Larson, but I do like that he is in Hendrick equipment now. Then dropping down to Austin Dillon, $8,300. He won the second dual race, actually beat out Bubba Wallace, and was a very good race. That dual 2 race was very, very racy. I thought we were going to have some boring racing, but that was actually pretty exciting. And if they race like that in Daytona 500, it's going to be a very, very entertaining race. But Austin Dillon, he is a good plate racer. He is a former Daytona 500 winner, and the guy he tends to run pretty well at these tracks. And looking at his numbers, average finish of 16th, over 30 DraftKings points per race, has a win, like I mentioned, a top 5, 2 top 10s, has some lap sled, has a decent amount of fast laps as well, although those are completely random, so I'm not going to really use them as anything. But I don't mind Austin Dillon in tournaments here. Obviously not going to play him in cash games starting inside the top 5, but if you want to take some stabs at guys starting inside the top 5, Austin Dillon and Eric Almirola I don't think are the worst plays in the world, so I like him a little bit, but nothing I will have too crazy ownership on, probably less than 5%, maybe around 5%, if that. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., $8,100. He is starting 21st, and I like Ricky Stenhouse here. Now, I like him better at Talladega than I do at Daytona, but Ricky Stenhouse is one of the best plate racers in the entire series, which sounds crazy because out of tracks that have a ton of wrecks, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. usually wrecks a ton and causes wrecks, so he's kind of opposite how he works. The tracks that there's a bunch of wrecks, he runs well. At the tracks that there's really not much wrecks, he tends to run pretty poorly. But I think taking a stab at Stenhouse here, starting in 21st, is not a bad option here, because if you look at the average running position, he tends to work his way to the front and lead laps. The average running position of 12, which is one of the best out of all these drivers, a really good drive rating at 90, some of the most laps led per race, just under 20. The problem is he tends to find himself in trouble at Daytona. At Talladega, he's pretty clean for the most part. Really, really good numbers at Talladega, but at Daytona, no wins recently, no top 5s, no top 10s, only 1 top 15 and 3 top 20s. Looking at the recent finishes, 32nd, 20th, 24th, 13th, 17th, and 29th. So definitely not a slam dunk play here, but there's plenty of upside for Stenhouse, and I do think he's a pretty solid tournament play. But you know what you're getting with Ricky Spinhouse, someone said Ricky Stankhouse. That's a new one that I've heard. There's a lot of nicknames for this guy, but you just got to be careful. But the guy is a very good plate racer, and starting in mid-pack, I think there's definitely some upside there for him. But it's probably going to be wreckers or checkers for Stenhouse, so just be prepared for that. Then dropping down to the 7K range, we have MDB at $7,900 starting 23rd. And if you guys watched the Sal Vetri video that I posted, I had MDB as one of my favorite tournament plays because the guy tends to run very well at Daytona and just super speedways in general. He's got that Penske power now these days. And if he can team up with his teammates at some point in this race and run in the front and just avoid the wrecks at some point and have a good finish, starting 23rd, I think there's plenty of upside there for MDB, close to 40 DraftKings points per race, an average finish inside 20, which I know is not a high bar, but Daytona, when you have an average finish inside this top 20, that's actually pretty good relative to the field. Good running position, 2 top 10 finishes, 3 top 15s. He's shown the ability to get up front as well. So MDB, I think he's actually a pretty strong tournament play. I think you could get away with him in cash games, but it is a little bit risky starting mid-pack. Then dropping down to Ross Chastain, nearly $8,000, but he's starting in 34th. But this is not the old Ross Chastain. He is now in the 42 car, which is what Kyle Larson used to run, so it's not that bad equipment. He's on the same team as Kurt Busch now, so got to keep that in mind. So I wouldn't say he's really overpriced or anything. I feel like that's justified, especially where he's starting at 34th, but he is an elite place differential play, so I have nothing bad to say about Ross Chastain. Plus, he has a good history here in much worse equipment. He's averaging close to 40 DraftKings points per race with an average finish of 20th because he tends to start in the back at these races. He tends to ride around, but now that he's in pretty good equipment, the strategy could change a little bit, so I guess that could be a little bit worrisome, but the floor is very high starting in 34th. He has a top 10 under his belt, top 15, 2 top 20s. But again, we're in much better equipment these days. So I think there's plenty of upside here for Ross Chastain. He just tends to run very well at these super speedways, puts up good fantasy points for DraftKings. So starting 34th, I'd say he's one of the better plays on this slate. Not too worried about price whatsoever. I kind of forgot to mention that, but a good way to get an edge here at Daytona or Talladega or whatever, leave salary on the table. Salary means absolutely nothing at this track. Like, I was looking at the previous optimal lineups. I think one of them had used only $31,000 in the salary cap. That means there's close to $20,000 remaining. The optimal lineup was just a bunch of these scrubs in the back, like the Belickis, the McLeods, the Gases, the Wares of the world. It was just a lineup full of those guys. I think Ty Dillon was in there as well. So do not be afraid to leave salary on the table. Don't think you have to absolutely lock in those guys that are super expensive just so you can fill out the salary cap. It is perfectly fine building a lineup that leaves a ton of salary on the table because there's a lot of wrecks and this just track is so unique compared to the rest of the tracks on this series. But anyway, we were talking about Ross Chastain, so I think we're now down to Christopher Bell. He's starting inside the top 5, so it makes him a pretty risky play. He has 2 races here in the Cup Series, averaging close to 35 DraftKings points per race. Not the worst numbers in the world, but the problem is, starting 5th now, it makes him an extremely risky play. He's going to have to finish inside the top 5, and he's going to have to at least compete for the win, lead some laps just for him to make the optimal lineup. It's going to be really hard for him to do that. So I would say he's reserved for tournaments only, but he's now in the 20 car with Eric Jones. We know Eric Jones had a good history here at Super Speedways. He is a recent winner at Daytona. And Christopher Bell, he's a very talented driver. I'm excited to see what he can do in the 20 car this season. He's got really good equipment. He was pretty good in the duels, hence his high qualifying spot. But yeah, I don't mind Bell, like a splash, maybe not a splash, maybe a sprinkle, like a little sprinkle of Christopher Bell, because it's going to be a very risky play there, because if anything happens to him, he is completely sinking your lineup. Same goes for Bubba Wallace. And the thing with Bubba Wallace is, I think he has a decent shot of winning this race. It'll also be a good title line or storyline for him to win this race. But if you guys don't know by now, I'm sure you guys do. But if we look at the driver info here on the left, he is no longer in that 43 car for Richard Petty Motorsports. He is now in the 23 car for Toyota for 23XI Racing or 2311 Racing, whatever you want to call it. But it's the team funded by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. Or I guess maybe not funded, but they're the team owners. But same, kind of the same thing, but they have plenty of sponsors lined up, so equipment is no longer an issue for Bubba Wallace. And I don't think he's had quite the ride of a guy like Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano, those kind of guys, but he has a ton of speed. We saw that in practice, we saw that in qualifying, we saw that during the duels. He almost won that duel race until Austin Dillon passed him. I think it was in turn 4 for the win, but Bubba Wallace has a ton of speed there. He's got pretty much a Joe Gibbs car, and starting 6th, it's pretty risky, but I think he could possibly win this race. So I'm definitely going to have some Bubba Wallace exposure because he was really impressive so far this week. So keep that in mind. He's also a pretty good plate racer as well. And looking at the numbers, even when he was just in the 43 car, an average finish inside the top 15, close to 35 DraftKings points per race, 2 top 5s, 2 top 10s, 5 top 15s, and looking at the specific finishes, 5th, 15th, 15th, wrecked in 38th, then 14th and 2nd. So Bubba Wallace knows his way around Daytona, and I'm actually pretty excited to see what he can do in this 23 car for 500 miles. So you can count me in for a little bit of Bubba Wallace exposure in tournament. I wouldn't touch him with the 10-foot pool in cash games, that is for sure, due to that starting spot. But Eric Jones here is $7,300. He is starting 31st. He is one of my favorite plays on the slate. And speaking of the old 43 car and Bubba Wallace, Eric Jones is the guy that took that over. He is now in the 43 car, but the thing is, the 43 car was not that bad, as we just talked about for Bubba Wallace. So Eric Jones starting all the way back in 31st. We know he's a good plate race driver. He's a recent, I guess he is a recent winner at Daytona. And he was very competitive in that very last Daytona race last season as well until he got wrecked. So starting 31st, I'd say he's one of the best plays on the slate for place differential. So definitely one of those cash game locks in my opinion. Tyler Reddick, $7,100, starting 29th. A very similar play to Eric Jones. So if you want a ton of Eric Jones and Tyler Reddick exposure, I have no issues with that whatsoever. I'd say they're one of the best plays on the slate. They have a very high floor and a very high ceiling as well. Ryan Newman, $7,000. He is starting 7th, which puts him in a very rough spot for fantasy purposes. And Newman, he's one of those guys I do like rostering for Daytona just because he's so good here at just staying clean until the end of the race and picking up a really good finish. Not a guy you really expect to compete for a win, although he did almost win the Daytona 500 last year, which we know what happened there. I don't think we had to explain that too much. I mean, the guy almost lost his life, but it was really incredible. He came back so quick, so hats off to Ryan Newman in that regard. But The guy's a good play racer, especially at Daytona. Average finish of 13.3, has a top 5, 4 top 10s, 5 top 15s, and overall some very strong numbers. Now last year, he finished 36th in the fall race, but 9th, 5th, 14th, 18th, and 8th. He is very consistent, has some of the best numbers overall at super speedways. The problem is he's starting 7th, so he's reserved as a tournament play only, but if he can stay within the top 5 at his price point, there's a chance it could work out, but it's going to be really hard to outscore a lot of those place differential plays, assuming there is a ton of wrecks in this race. So Newman is a very low-owned tournament play only for me. Definitely not a guy that I would go too crazy on exposure-wise. Then dropping down to the 6K range, we have Chris Buescher at $1,600 starting 22nd. If you guys, like I mentioned earlier, if you watched the Sal video, I talked about Chris Buescher here. I think he's one of the stronger tournament plays on this slate because the starting position, he's not all the way in the back where he's in the 30s, so he has a super high floor. So there's a bit of risk here, but Chris Buescher is one of the best drivers at Daytona. These numbers are very, very strong for a guy, especially in his equipment and relative to his price point as well. An average finish of 12.7, which is actually better than Ryan Newman. But looking at the recent finishes, or the recent races, I guess, 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and 5 top 20s in the specific finishes, 9th, 9th, 17th, wrecked for 37th, and 5th and 5th. So Chris Buescher, I think he's a very strong tournament play, and I would not mind being overweight in the field here on Chris Buescher by any means. Then dropping down to Cole Custer, he's in his year 2, and he does not have a good track record here at Daytona. It's only a 2-race sample size, so I'm not going to really use it against him, because if you get wrecked, you get wrecked. There's really nothing you can do about it. He has finishes of 30th and 37th, but I like his starting spot of 27th here. I think he's a really good place differential play, and I'm going to have a good chunk of ownership on Cole Custer. Chase Briscoe, we have no information on here because he is a rookie, but he's starting all the way back in 30th. Now, the thing is, I'm a little bit wary about playing rookies, especially at Daytona, but his starting spot in 30th definitely makes him a pretty interesting play because it's going to be hard for him to lose spots unless he happens to wreck out. And that's the problem with the rookie, though, because it's his first Cup race at Daytona. There's 40 cars. They're flying. I mean, he could end up making a stupid decision, and he could be the reason why there's a big wreck early on. But he's in good equipment. He's in Clint Boyer's old car. I believe Clint Boyer actually started in the 30s last year and ended up making the optimal lineup. So Chase Briscoe, I think he's got a pretty safe floor. I'm a little bit worried because he is a rookie, but I think he'll be fine with that starting spot. It's also a nice price tag as well. Jamie McMurray, $6,400. He is starting 19th. Now he's in the 77 car for Spire, but this is not the same Spire Motorsports. They definitely have an uptick, and we know that they're getting help from Chip Ganassi. They're getting help from Hendrick Motorsports, and those are some pretty good equipment here for Spire. So I don't think McMurray is driving a lawnmower here by any means. Now the problem is, he's starting in 19th. Now, he has plenty of experience here at Daytona, but the thing is he really going to be able to outscore a guy like Briscoe, Cole Custer, Chris Buescher, Austin Cindric that are starting further back than him? If he can squeak inside the top 10 and those guys fail, it could work out. I would have a little bit of exposure to Jamie McMurray, but nothing too crazy there. But we know he definitely has a ton of experience at Daytona. Michael McDowell, $6,300, starting 17th. The thing that sucks here is that he usually starts farther back. Like, he's usually in the mid-20s or the 30s, which makes him one of the best plays in the entire slate because the guy is really, really good at Daytona, averaging close to 45 DraftKings points per race, an average finish of 13.5. Good running position relative to his price point. Other guys that are priced around him, decent drive rating of 80 for sure. And he has 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, 5 top 15s. And if you're looking at the actual finishes for Michael McDowell here, 14th, 13th, 5th, 26th, 9th, he's kind of been a machine when he doesn't have issues. So I don't hate playing Michael McDowell in tournaments because I think he can get you a top 15 finish. And people are probably going to be afraid to play him because of his high starting spot. And people think of Michael McDowell starting 17th, they're probably going to say ew to themselves, which I get. But the guy is a very good racer at Daytona, so if you want a nice tournament play down here for a guy that doesn't start too high up, I think Michael McDowell is your guy. I think he definitely has some upside here despite that higher starting spot. Because Austin Cindric starting right below him, or priced right below him, he's going to have a ton more ownership because he's starting near dead last. There's only one guy starting further back than him, and that's Gralla in 40th. But Cindric here should soak up a ton of ownership, and if he happens to wreck out or only gets like 30th place and Michael McDowell finds himself in the top 10, I like that in tournaments. Now, in cash games, Cindric is one of the best plays in the slate because the price is low. He's starting 39th. I mean, his floor is very, very high. If we look at the heat map, I guess I'll give you guys another freebie because I'm feeling nice. And it's the first race of the season, so why the heck not? So Cindric here, if I have this right, I tried correcting it for the new DraftKings scoring, but I might not have it perfect. But if it is right, his floor would be 3 points. If he's the first guy that wrecks and finishes 40th, he gets 3 points. And look at someone like Christopher Bell. If he happens to be the first guy that wrecks out, he would have negative 31 points. So yeah, the floor is very high for these guys starting in the back. As you can see, the nice flowing rainbow here. These guys have a much higher floor and higher ceiling than the guys starting up front. But anyway, let's get back to the main sheet here. We were just talking about Cindric. Look, he's not in a dumpster car by any means. He is part of Team Penske in the Xfinity Series, and his car is the 33 car. It is from Team Penske, so the guy doesn't have absolute trash by any means. So he's got better equipment than most, I would say, down here. And Cindric, if he can get us like a top 25, top 20 finish, I mean, he's a very, very, very strong play at only $6,100. So Cindric, I'd say, is one of my favorite plays on the slate because of that high floor, even though he is a rookie, technically, in the Cup Series. So I guess that's a little bit worrisome, but he's starting dead last, so the floor, I mean, he's a very, very safe play here. Ryan Preece, $6,000. He's starting 11th. I can't imagine I'll have much Ryan Preece whatsoever. He's not that great at Daytona. He does have a top 10 finish, but an average finish outside the top 25, only averaging 20 DraftKings points per race, a low driver rating. The average running position isn't that great. If he was starting in the back, I'd be interested. But Preece is one of those guys that's like a magnet for wrecks, it seems like. Looking at the recent finishes at Daytona, 37th, 29th, 32nd, and 8th in his first race. So Preece, not really loving him, especially in that starting spot. Then moving down to more of the bottom tier drivers, but Corey LaJoie, no slight to him, he's just priced like it. But I do like Corey LaJoie at Daytona. The guy's actually one of the better guys to roster at Daytona, but he typically starts way further back. Now that he's starting 16th, it makes him close to unplayable. Not saying you can't play him because he does have a couple top 10 finishes here, but he's one of those guys that likes to ride around in the back. As you can see, average running position of 30.4, driver rating 43.4, but an average finish right around 20th place, which is usually fantastic for where he starts in the 30s. Now he's starting 16th. If he finishes 20th, that is not a good day by Corey LaJoie by any means. So it's going to make him very tough to play. Now, I like the 7 car that he's in. I think it's going to be a bit of an upgrade that he's had in recent seasons, but starting 16th, it's going to be very, very hard to want to play Corey LaJoie. Although he is a good plate race driver, if he happens to fall to the back right around and gets a top 10 finish, it can work out. Just know there is risk there with that starting spot, and the upside is definitely limited. Same goes for Daniel Suarez. He is no longer in the lawnmower. In the past 5 races for Suarez at Daytona have been awful. He's not even averaging a point per race. Average finish of 34.2. If you want to look at the specific finishes and have a laugh, Suarez's finishes are not pretty. 26th, 33rd, 35th, 37, just some overall pretty rough numbers there for Daniel Suarez. So yeah, it's not pretty. I hate the starting spot as well. Now, like I mentioned, he is no longer in the lawnmower. That was what Ty Dillon was driving in the dual race. He is now in the 99 car for Trackhouse Racing, which I do think is going to be a bit of an upgrade there. So you might see a bit of a better car for Daniel Suarez in races this season, but starting 15th, there's just barely any upside because I can't see him finishing inside the top 10. David Reagan, again, he's not bad at Daytona by any means. He's just starting way too high for me to really like him. Now he has top 15 potential. He has a top 5, a top 10. It's just really hard to click on David Reagan's name at that starting spot. So I'll have very, very minimal exposure on Reagan, if any. Then moving down to Anthony Alfredo, which kind of pains me to say because I am absolutely starving. I did not have lunch. I did not have dinner because I've been working on NASCAR stuff all day. So I'm really grinding for you guys. I promise. I had breakfast, but I am hungry. I'm going to have a very, very big dinner, I think. But anyway, Alfredo, starting 36, he's an elite place differential play. I know he wrecked out of the first, was it the first or second dual race? Whatever one it was. He wrecked out, and got to keep in mind, he is in John Hunter Nemechek's old car. We knew Nemechek wrecked, it seemed like, every single week. So buyer beware there, but starting 36, very, very safe play in my opinion. Gralla, he's starting dead last, so he is the best floor place differential play in the entire slate. I will have plenty of exposure to him because he can only move up, and even if he does not have a great race, he can outscore those guys that wreck early on by like 30 points if the right guys wreck. So I definitely like Gralla, very, very high floor play in the 16 car. McLeod, okay, so after Gralla, it gets a bit iffy with all these guys because they are starting in the back, and if there is wrecks, they can move up. It's just their equipment sucks, but McLeod, the 3 races he has at Daytona, he has an average finish inside the top 30 and averaging 24.7 DraftKings points per race. That is not that bad. So BJ McLeod, I will have some BJ McLeod. Sorry, I dropped my phone in my lap. I will have some BJ McLeod ownership. And if the guy that's watching this that always comments about BJ McLeod, I'm sure you are ecstatic to hear that. You can play BJ McLeod on this slate. I give you plenty of permission to do so. But Licky, again, these guys' cars are not very good, but they're starting in the back. So if there's wrecks, they'll move up, so they are viable plays. Same goes for Joey Gase. The problem with Gase is he's starting 28th. So if I'm going to fade anyone back here, I would say Gase is definitely one of those options because he's starting really farther. He's really starting far up, and I mean, if you're starting in the 30s, it'd be viable, but that's a tough starting spot for me to want to play Joey Gase. Derek Cope is over 60 years old. He about killed the field twice in the dual race, so if you don't want to play Derek Cope, I get that. I assume he is going to be slow, and I don't know. I can't trust a guy that's over 60-year-old. I'm sorry. I hope it's not ageism, but I don't really want to play Derek Cope. Maybe if you want to play one lineup and just to say you play Derek Cope, you can, but I can't really recommend him. Cody Ware starting 35th, he's a viable play. Quinn Half starting 33rd, he is a viable play if there's wrecks. These guys all have place differential upside, but I think that's going to be it for the video, guys. I think we're close to 50 minutes, so sorry for the marathon, but you guys know I always go long in my NASCAR videos, but you guys don't seem to mind, so I do appreciate that. But yeah, I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps the channel out, and it helps the channel grow, helps it in the YouTube algorithm, and I do appreciate that. If you want to follow me over on social media, Pennell16 on Twitter, CPen16 on IG, and if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, links down below for that. I talked about all that stuff earlier, but I can throw another picture on the screen if I remember. If I didn't, I probably look stupid just doing this right now, but whatever. If you want to get into the DraftKings contest, make sure you leave your username in the comments down below. I will be going live on Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Then I'll be going live before lock with Awesemo an hour before the race starts as well. So we have that to look forward to. But I'm super happy NASCAR is back. Yeah, the Clash and the Duel are fun, but Daytona 500, it's the star of the show, and I am super, super excited for it. So thank you for watching. If you made it all the way through, let me know in the comments below. You guys are the true troopers. I do appreciate you guys watching it all the way through. But I'm going to sign off. I'm going to stop rambling, and I'll see you guys in the next video.